Hi, my name is Mark Biernot. I'm a monetary economist. In this video, I want to answer the question, can Ukraine outproduce Russia in terms of armaments to defend itself, even without the reliance on external forces like the United States? Initially, you may say, oh, this is impossible. It is not possible. And you may bear evidence of the great amount of armaments and defensive equipment the U.S. and its allies, including Europe and around the world, from Canada to Australia, have provided. You have to put this in perspective. That was going up against a huge stockpile of Soviet armaments, which basically have been depleted at this point. So to answer that question, we have to drill down to economics and find the answer. In one of my last videos, I made a production table of every country. The United States would be, for example, 11 production hexes. Ukraine would only be 1 production hex, and Russia at this juncture, 3 production hexes. Europe would be 10 production hexes. And then I added some others like Canada. I put in China. Maybe I overstated China, some of you pointed out. I have to make some adjustments. I based it on not only GDP, PPP, and military index. And I said, okay, so, they produce X amount that can be applied to the index, but the PPP means that it's actually cheaper, so it's not totally equated in terms of dollars to dollars. And I came out, it popped 14 industrial hexes when I made this formula. But thinking back on it, reflecting it, and looking at the actual economy, I probably should have whittled that down to maybe like 10 or something, or 11. Maybe parity with the United States, although I think the U.S. could just, outproduce if they needed to China. But that's not the point of this video. I created this matrix. And then over the last few days, I created a production table of units. How much does it cost and how long does it take to create an infantry unit, a drone unit, a bomber unit, a mechanized unit, an armor unit? What is the attack strength? What is the defense strength? What is the movement points associated with each one of those units, and equated in terms of payments, in terms of industrial production hexes? I wanted to display this for you, but I have massive computer problems, which I hope to address someday. And more important, I have a limited amount of time. So I thought I'd just articulate the game system. I could create a game with this, and I've thought about it in a non-entertaining form, just in terms of a geopolitical gameplay to see where this all plays out. But my point is, you have on one hand, you have countries with industrial production hexes representing their basic ability to produce these units. And these units, if you put it on a grid, have varying capabilities. And if we simplify it and distill it, you have attack, defense, movement, and cost, as well as time production. Infantry would be probably, I put it as 1 for attack, 2 for defense, and 1 for industrial hex production, and 1 for time. Where I believe my drone units would cost, I believe it was 2, but it had 3 attack, 2 defense, or maybe it was 1 defense, and that was also 1 in terms of time for the duration of production. So you can already see something, that you can see that you can game the system by producing the most efficient units quickly. The ones that have the highest attack strength. Oh, and it had a movement of 3, okay, where the infantry had a movement of 1. So drones have a longer range. They're eons more inexpensive than a bomber, okay, which has a long production time frame. So you can kind of game the system. That's point number 1. Ukraine can game the system. And you can say Russia can do it, but we'll get to that. Point number 2 is you might say, oh, Russia has 3, Ukraine has 1 production hexes. So naturally, Russia's going to have a 3-to-1 production advantage. But if you've ever played these geopolitical military simulations from Civilization to a global war to World War III in the SBI old school sense, what happens is, as a society progresses, they get a production multiplier. So that 1 production hex becomes to 1.5 times 3 or whatever the multiplier it is. And in, the SPI game, I think it was 1975 Global War, Germany had a huge production, even though they only had 5 production hexes, I believe. They had a multiplier of 5, which gave them 25 production hexes. I'd like to put this in the gameplay so you can see it and you can map it and you can test it and you can critique it. Just don't have the time right now, so I'm articulating it. So in theory, Ukraine can do this, especially if you consider Adam Smith's specialization. All he talked about was specialization and how it had a multiplicative effect, an exponential effect. His example he used was the pin factory. Please look up the pin factory. It was a hypothetical situation, but certainly creating drones is much more complex and more specialized than a pin. So Ukraine, once it gets its momentum going, it can outproduce Russia in drone production. Sounds like a bold claim, but think about the Netherlands, which in my opinion, at this point, this year outproduces Russia in terms of total production. Look at Taiwan, Singapore. It doesn't take a large landmass. Sometimes large land masses for logistical reasons and other reasons work against you. It takes specialization and strategic and tactical planning. And I believe the Ukrainians are doing that very effectively because they're highly motivated. So where does that lead us? Even if Ukraine gets no aid from Europe, Canada, and Australia, and other countries, which I find hard to believe, and they're standing their one production hex, first thing is that production hex can equal 3 or 5 or 7 if it is structured properly. You don't need a lot of people and you don't need a lot of money. What you need is specialization. And second thing they can do is focused on where you get your most bang for your buck units. Certainly we like to have the bombers and the armor. I think the armor has something like attack 6 on my metrics, but it costs like 5 times more than a drone unit, when the drone unit is 3. So you get, there's an optimal ratio. So if they specialize in these optimal units, and we know that infantry is 1 attack, 2 defense, so it's not necessarily an optimal strategy to just stack up on infantry, because then it just turns into an attrition war. The second thing about drone units is they can directly affect Russian production and attack Russian production. So if Russia's at 3, we can knock it down to 2. So there's multifaceted drone technology, especially AI guided, that can have a multiplicative exponential effect and amplify that Ukrainian 1 production hex. So I would like to make the claim that even if Ukraine had 0 support, it can stand on its own. If they have some support from, let's say, Australia, Canada, Europe, including the UK, with time, they will be able to overrun Russia, because the Russian economy is at the verge of a massive disequilibrium the way they've been running it. You can make the same claim for Ukraine, but it's not, because Ukraine has open markets, more flexible. Russia is closed behind a vault. And if you don't believe me, just ask yourself what happened in 1917 to Russia. What happened to the Soviet Union in the 90s? So perhaps it would have been better if I showed you on a chart these industrial hexes. Remember, America 11, Europe 10, Ukraine 1, Russia 3, China contributing, let's say, 3 to Russia. I believe Ukraine can outmatch Russia in terms of production of specialized tactical drone units, etc. And my evidence again is Adam Smith, the pin factory. He explained it can be 10, 15 times more productive than one person. And Russia may be wanting to do that. They may be aspiring to do that. But my understanding of economics, they're not and they can't. They just can't do it. They just don't have it in them. They're more about extract oil and gets things from other countries. So this geopolitical is important. And if the U.S., turns its head and runs, sticks its head in the sand, or whatever it wants to do, and I'm a proud American, but I separate American geopolitics from Washington, Ukraine can stand on its own and be victorious. I firmly believe that. I play these game simulations. I would like to create it. I have a flair for programming. I'd like to create it and just release it and demonstrate it to you. Right now, I'm under academic pressure. So bear with me, guys. That's my claim that Ukraine can stand on its own if it needs to. But if it gets help, it will overrun Russia. My name is Mark Biernat. I'm a monetary economist. Have a great day. Thank you very much.